Hello, welcome to another Wednesday webinar. My name is Danai the Tutor, and thank you so much for joining. Today we are going to be looking at the evaluation question for Edexcel, which appears on as question 4 for paper 1. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Thank you for joining, and sorry, I just had a notification. Yes, so we're focusing on evaluation today. Hello, Veronica. Nice to see you again. And as I said, we're looking at Edexcel. So the evaluation question is the final question for section 1. Okay, so when you are doing your GCSEs, your paper is divided into 2 sections, and section A, you have to analyze an extract. So the final question for that section A is evaluation, and it's worth 15 marks, which is the most marks, excuse me, for section A. Okay, so it's a very important question in terms of how many marks it's worth. It can make a very big difference to your grade. To introduce myself, like I said, my name is Danai, and I am a qualified English teacher. I qualified in 2017, and I was teaching in the classroom until I welcomed my daughter in 2022. And I love baking, watching cooking shows, and playing tennis. So, like I said, we are looking at Edexcel. And the Edexcel mark scheme is as follows for the top grade. So if you want to get the most marks, like I said, it's out of 15. If you want to get between 13 and 15 marks, then you need to show an evaluation of ideas, events, themes, or settings. And we're going to talk about what that actually means, okay, because it's in the mark scheme, but then you have to understand, well, what do they mean by setting, events, themes, or ideas? You have to show a sustained and detached critical overview and judgment about the text. And then you have to have a selection of references that are apt and discriminating. And you have to be persuasive as well in clarifying your points that you are making. So because you are being asked to evaluate, it's really important to understand, what does evaluation actually mean? Okay, so evaluation simply means making a judgment or giving your opinion. Okay, so it's not just saying what you think, it's adding an informed opinion to your analysis. So far, again, the questions that you would have had up to this point will be asking you to analyze, explain, but this question is actually asking for your opinion, but your opinion has to be informed by the text you are reading. And today we are going to be reading the text and looking at how to do that. So, like I said, the mark scheme talks about settings, ideas, themes, and events. So we are going to look at what those things actually mean. Even though it does talk about settings, ideas, themes, and events, it doesn't. You're not limited to that. Okay. So you could also talk about characters, for example. Okay. You can talk about characters. You can also analyze language and structure, but only do that to support your evaluation. Okay. So we'll look at how that looks as well later on. So setting. Setting can refer to the place. So it could be the country, city, street, house, room, whether the text is set indoors or outdoors, the weather, the time of day, the particular year or history. All those things have an impact on the narrative and the reader. So a writer is very deliberate in their choice of where they choose to set their story. So as a reader, you should ask yourself, well, why is the writer deciding to set this in a haunted house? Okay, usually, for example, typically horror stories or gothic stories, they might be set in a haunted house. It's a very typical example, but it's just to demonstrate my point, okay? Because they're trying to create an eerie atmosphere, for example. However, if the story is more about, it's a particularly cheery, happy story, they might choose for the sun to be shining, and it might be set on a beach somewhere, okay? Again, those are very simplistic examples, but setting is just to demonstrate that setting is deliberate, and you should be asking yourself, well, why is the writer choosing this setting? How is it helping the story? Okay, so setting is the first thing that you can evaluate for that question. The second thing, and like I said, this is a bonus thing, it's not in the mark scheme, but it's certainly something that you would be rewarded for analyzing, because you're not just limited to those things, okay? Character. So character can refer to the way the writer shapes the protagonist, so that's the main character. The antagonist, that's the villain. And you can see in the background, I've chosen a picture of the Joker because I think that's a well-known villain from Batman. And then other characters as well, okay? All these things, again, they can have an impact on the narrative. The type of character that's being picked will shape the story. So that's another thing that you can analyze. The next thing that you can look at are ideas. Okay, so this one can be a little bit more tricky, and it does take time to practice looking for it and to understand it. But ideas can refer to concepts, lessons maybe in the text, or the main aim of the text. So all of this can have an impact on the story, depending on the ideas that are in the story. Themes, okay, is the last thing stated in the mark scheme. And the theme can refer to a topic or subject matter of the story, and it closely links with ideas, okay? But it's the recurrence, okay, or the repetition of a concept, lessons, symbols. So in the background, you can see that picture of the woman's face, and it's duplicated several times on the same picture, because I want you to think about themes as something that comes up over and over again, perhaps in a text, in a story. So theme, okay? So those are the things that you need to look for first and think about evaluating when you get to question 4. Events. Sorry, I forgot about events. Events can refer to anything interesting or significant that happens. So stories are full of events. You can't have a story without an event. So that's another thing that you can look at and think, how is this event successful? How does this event help the writer shape their story? So you do not need to write about each and every one of these, okay? So when you get to the evaluation question, you don't have to write a paragraph about setting, a paragraph about ideas, a paragraph about, that's not the point, okay? But you can whatever is available in the text of those things, you can evaluate. And for this question, because it's a 15-mark question, aim for at least 4 paragraphs, okay? Because you do have quite a lot of time to tackle this question. So aim for 4 paragraphs. Right, and the next thing that you have to do for an evaluation question is to show that you are making a judgment, okay? So again, a judgment means you're giving your opinion. So you want to make it very obvious to the examiner that you have made a judgment. And you can do that by using words like successfully, powerfully, effectively, creatively, skillfully, okay? These are just examples. You don't have to limit yourself to these, okay? You can use other adverbs that show that you are evaluating, like interestingly or convincingly or aptly, okay? But you just have to think and you remember that you are evaluating, you are making a judgment, and these words are all about making that obvious to the examiner that you are making a judgment. So to remember those, you can use specs as a way of remembering it, okay? So for what you are evaluating, Site is a good way to remember it. Okay, so I'll go back to it now. Site, like that. Okay, SCITE, site. Settings, characters, ideas, themes, events. And then for the evaluation vocabulary, specs is a good one to remember. Okay, so successfully, powerfully, effectively, creatively, skillfully. That can just help you. And I am an examiner for Edexcel, and I often see at the top of the question 4, students will write sites and specs because it just helps them remember. So it's a good one to remember and bear in mind. Okay, so it's an evaluation question, but you can talk about writer's techniques, but you only talk about them to support your evaluation. Okay, because if you just talk about the techniques without evaluating, you can't get more than 6 out of 15 marks. Okay, if you do that, you can't even get 50% for this question. So you can talk about techniques like language and structure techniques. However, you only use them to support your evaluation. Okay, so first of all, evaluate the use of settings, ideas, events, and then you can support it with an evaluation. Okay, so as we read now the text, I want you to ask yourself, okay, where has the writer used settings? Where have they used the character? Where have they used ideas, themes, and events? So later on, after we read, we'll be thinking closely about how they're using it. But first of all, I want you to identify the use of these things, okay? Where has the writer used settings, character, ideas, themes, events? So if you've just joined us, these are some of the things that you can explore when you are evaluating, okay? Settings, character, idea, themes, events. You're going to read this text and you would have already received this if you registered. If not, it's okay because I'm obviously displaying it. And there's some words that might be unfamiliar. So at the bottom of the text, I've just put some definitions of those words. So if there are any words that you come across and you think, I don't know what that means, check the end of the text. And it's the same in your exam as well. You will have vocabulary, some words that you might be given definitions of some words that the exam board might predict might be difficult. Okay. And which is common for a 19th century text. So here we go. So the narrator, Jane Eyre, has been locked in the Red Room as punishment for standing up for herself against her cousin. The Red Room was a square chamber, very seldom slept in. I might say never, indeed, unless when a chance of influx of visitors at Gateshead Hall rendered it necessary to turn to account all the accommodation it contained. Yet it was one of the largest and stateliest chambers in the mansion. A bed supported on massive pillars of mahogany, hung with curtains of deep red damask, stood out like a tabernacle in the centre. The 2 large windows, with their blinds always drawn down, were half shrouded in festoons and falls of similar drapery. The carpet was red. The table at the front of the bed was covered with a crimson cloth. The walls were a soft fawn colour with a blush of pink in it. The wardrobe, the toilet table, the chairs were of darkly polished old mahogany. Out of these deep surrounding shades rose high and glared white the piled up mattress and pillows of the bed, spread with a snowy Marseille counterpane. Scarcely less prominent was an ample cushioned easy chair near the head of the bed, also white, with a footstool before it and looking, as I thought, like a pale throne. Okay, so that's the opening paragraph. So, what are we seeing prominently in that opening paragraph? Is it a use of setting, character, ideas, themes, events? What are we seeing? What's their focus on in that opening paragraph? Is the writer focusing on a setting? Is the writer focusing on a character? Is the writer focusing on an idea? Is the writer focusing on a theme? Or is the writer focusing on an event in that first paragraph that we've just read? So you can type in your answers to that. What is the writer focusing on in that opening paragraph? I'll give you a minute to have a think. Okay, so that first paragraph, what is the focus? Is it the setting? Is it the character, ideas, themes, or events? Okay, so that opening paragraph is focusing on the setting. Okay, so if you look at that first sentence, it says the red room was a square chamber. Okay, so it's focusing on that room, the red room. Okay, and then the narrator describes the room, describes the items in the room, the colors that are used in great detail. So the focus of that whole paragraph is the room, meaning there's a focus on setting. Okay. And when I tell you what our question is, you can start to think about how is it contributing to a specific atmosphere in the text. Okay. Next paragraph. The room was chill because it seldom had a fire. It was silent because it was remote from the nursery and kitchen, solemn because it was known to be so seldom entered. The housemaid, alone, came here on Saturdays to wipe from the mirrors and the furniture a week's quiet dust. And Mrs. Reed herself, at far intervals, visited it to review the contents of a certain secret drawer in the wardrobe, where were stored divers parchments, a jewel casket, and a miniature of a deceased husband. And in those last words lies the secret of the Red Room, the spell which kept it so lonely in spite of its grandeur. So we're still focusing on the room, but we've got a bit more information about who enters the room, why they enter the room. Okay. And so there's a there's an addition, okay, to it. The writer hasn't necessarily stopped focusing on the room. Again, that first sentence, the room was chill. So that first paragraph is still about the room, but we've got additional information. We've got some characters included now. And also, there's a repetition of the word seldom. Okay, it was used at the very beginning, very seldom slept in. Seldom means rarely. Okay, it means not very often. So very seldom slept in means hardly anyone slept in that room. Okay, and then when it says because it seldom had a fire, it means it hardly had a fire. And there's a repetition of that word. So we can even begin to pick up maybe on a theme there, okay? A particular theme because there's that repetition. Okay. Mr. Reed had been dead 9 years. It was in this chamber he breathed his last. Here he lay in state, hence his coffin was borne by the undertaker's men. And since that day, a sense of dreary consecration had guarded it from frequent intrusion. So in that paragraph, we are told that Mr. Reed passed away in that room. Okay, someone passed away in that room. So we start to get a sense as to why maybe people are avoiding that room. Okay. My seat, to which Bessie and the bitter Miss Abbott had left me riveted, was a low ottoman near the marble chimney, peace. The bed rose before me. To my right hand, there was a high, dark wardrobe with subdued, broken reflections, varying the gloss of its panels. To my left were the muffled windows. A great looking glass between them repeated the vacant majesty of the bed and room. I was not quite sure whether they locked the door, and when I dared to move, I got up and went to see. Alas, yes, no jail has ever been more secure. Returning, I had to cross before the looking glass. My fascinated glance involuntarily glared the depth it revealed. All looked colder and darker in that visionary hollow than in reality, and the strange little figure there gazing at me with a white face and arms specking the gloom and glittering eyes of fear moving where all else was still had the effect of a real spirit. I thought it like one of the tiny phantoms, fairy half imp, Bessie's evening stories represented as coming out of lone ferny dells in moors and appearing before the eyes of belated travellers. I returned to my stool. So in that final paragraph, again, there's a focus back on the room itself, okay? And we see the narrator looking at herself, when she refers to the looking glass, that's a mirror, okay? And she's looking at herself and she's describing herself as a strange little figure, okay? So when she's saying a strange little figure gazing at me, she's talking about looking at herself, okay? With a white face and arms specking the room, glittering eyes of fear moving, okay? So we can see we have more insights about how she's feeling as she's looking at herself in that section of the text. And the final sentence of the extract, I returned to my stool. So she's in that room, okay? She's alone. And also, quite significantly, she's locked in the room, okay? It says, alas, yes, no jail was ever more secure. So we know the two characters, Bessie and Miss Abbott, are the ones who had put her in the room, okay? And she's locked in this room all alone, okay? So now the question is, the writer has attempted to create an intimidating atmosphere. Evaluate how successfully this is achieved. And for this is how your question is worded, okay? You're given a statement about what the writer has attempted to do, and then you have to evaluate how successfully it's achieved. So I advise students to agree with the statement and go along the line that yes, the writer is successful, okay? Because it doesn't stop you from gaining full marks, fully agreeing with the statement. And it's usually easier to do so, okay? So in the exam, you want to save yourself time and you want to make the job as, you want to be efficient in what you're doing. So I would say agree with the statement or say that the writer is successful. And now your job is to prove how the writer is successful. So if we think about the text, okay, some examples, so I've highlighted them in the next slides, okay? So we have, like I said, we've got this repeated idea, okay? Very seldom slept in the orange for idea. Very seldom slept in, it seldom had a fire, so seldom entered, okay? So we could even say that's a theme because it's repeated, okay? The fact that people avoided this, the fact that it was a room that people didn't want to go in, okay? And our question about the room being intimidating, okay, and the intimidating atmosphere, we can see that how that idea contributes to that through those quotes. And then I've highlighted some examples of setting. They're not all the examples because basically that first paragraph, all the sentences nearly are about the setting. So I've just picked out some. So curtains of deep red damask, blinds always drawn down, half shrouded festoons, darkly polished old mahogany, all of those create a specific atmosphere and they contribute to a sense of an intimidating atmosphere in a very specific way. And then again, the room being chill, the room is cold. Okay, how does a room being cold contribute to an intimidating atmosphere? That's something that you can consider. Okay, and then as we carry on, okay, the event of Mr. Reed dying is quite a significant event because the idea that someone died in a specific room can add to a sense of intimidation. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you to tell me how that is so. We've also got the event of her being put in the room. The narrator has been placed in this room forcibly as a form of punishment, okay? As a form of punishment. And so we can think about how that creates an intimidating atmosphere. We've also got that description of her face. So you can feed that into character as well, okay, in the green. Right. So for this question, I always think it's very useful to think about the beginning, middle, and end and get the events very clear, okay? What's happening in the beginning, what's happening in the middle, what's happening in the end, and how is that all helping to create a specific atmosphere? So, as we can see, it's the event of someone dying in the room is in the middle, okay? And that adds to the idea of the room being quite intimidating. Okay, so at the beginning, the fact that the room is very big, it's dimly lit, so it's quite dark because of those half shrouded blinds, okay, and all decorated in red, that could come across as quite intimidating. Okay, but then also when you add to that in the middle of the extract, the fact that someone died in that room, okay, that makes it even more intimidating, okay, and adds a layer of intimidation. And then finally, the fact that she is alone, locked in that room, okay, also you can say adds the idea of the room being quite intimidating. Right, so now it's your turn, and you can add your answers to the chat. So I've got 4 bullet points on the screen. So using the extract, try and answer all those questions. Now, these questions are designed to have you think about the text in an evaluation. Think about the text to evaluate the text. Okay, so how does the size of the room help to create an intimidating atmosphere effectively? Okay, so think about the size of the room. How does that help make the atmosphere come across as intimidating? What are the connotations of the color red? So connotation means what are the things that we associate, the ideas that we associate with the color red? And then what does seldom slept in and seldom entered tell us? And the last question, how does the writer build an image of darkness successfully? Okay, so there are 4 questions there. So we'll go for 5 minutes for that. Try and answer all those questions. And I'm starting the timer here, so I'll tell you when the time is up. Okay. Sorry, let me start my timer again. Okay, there we go. 5 minutes, okay? And try and answer those questions and add them to the chat if you'd like some feedback on there. So you're not doing this in a paragraph, you are just answering the questions. Answering them in a sentence, I should say. So just answer them in a full sentence, not necessarily as a paragraph, because this is just getting you to think evaluatively. Okay, good. So the size of the room helps us to create an intimidating atmosphere because of the details there. Okay, good. So what you need to do, okay, is to think about, think more specifically, okay. So the size of the room, is it a big room? Is it a small room? Okay. Is it a big room? Is it a small room? And then think about why that might be intimidating. Okay. Think about why that might be intimidating. You've mentioned the details. Okay. So I would say, give me an example. What do you mean by that? Which detail do you think is intimidating? Which detail? So you just need to be more specific. Okay. So that question is about the size of the room. So you need to actually address that part of the question. Is it a big room? Is it a small room? And then, if so, whichever one it is, how does that make it intimidating? Yes, it's a big room, exactly. Okay. So I'll give you an example for if it was a small room, okay, a small room might be intimidating because it feels constrained. Okay. So that sense of limitation and constraint could make a small room quite intimidating. Okay. Because somebody might feel like they are being, there's no way out. Because some people, for example, if someone is claustrophobic, okay, small spaces are quite intimidating because it feels like there's nowhere to breathe, no freedom. The details that it's intimidating is how everything there. The details that it's intimidating is how everything there. Exactly. Okay. So the size of everything, okay, that might contribute to an intimidating atmosphere because yes, so the size, okay, because it might be overwhelming, might add to a sense of being overpowered. Good. Okay, so just 40 seconds left. Oh, okay. Like doing this. Okay, that's okay. Okay, yeah, so good. It is intimidating because it's big, because something that's big could be quite overwhelming, you could say. Okay. Okay, so time is 5 minutes is up. So I'll show you some example points. So the size of the room as one of the largest and stateliest chambers conveys. You didn't know anything for the second one. That's okay. We'll go through them now. Okay. If you've got any more, if you did anything for the other ones, you can add them as well. But I'm gonna go through these, the answers for those now. So the size of the room as one of the largest and stateliest chambers conveys the room as imposing, especially when someone is there alone. Okay, so imposing meaning something that is that sort of forces itself on you, feels kind of inescapable, okay, and overwhelming as well. And then for the second one, red is a color associated with power and violence. And so the abundance of it successfully creates an intimidating space. Okay. So for that one, when you think about the connotations of a color, that relies on you knowing the ideas or associations with a color. Okay. So red, because blood is red, so sometimes it can have the connotations of violence because the only time you might see someone's blood is when there has been some sort of injury. Okay, um, so it could be associated with violence. It can also be associated with power. So red is generally quite a strong and striking color. So the fact that it's used in the whole room, okay, means that it can be quite intimidating. The next one, the idea of being seldom slept in and seldom entered. I'll just check that you read. Oh, love. Yes. So red can be associated with love as well. That's true, very much. Okay. However, you have to look at the context of the situation. Okay. So if somebody had written, if this story was about somebody who had written a love letter and they put it in a red envelope, right? You can say that the use of the color red is to link with the idea of love. However, in this situation, this girl has been put in this room as a punishment, all alone, okay? And so this room being red might be associated with a different type of connotation. So always look at the instance where a particular symbol or color is being used. Right, the fourth bullet point, it is not. Sorry, so you said it is not. What do you mean by that? Okay, why answer that? So the idea of seldom slept in, oh, I think that's why you're answering that one. And seldom entered informs that other people avoided the red room, effectively suggesting it's dreaded. Okay. And then lastly, the writer creatively builds an image of darkness as the blinds are always drawn down and were half shrouded, which creates a foreboding atmosphere. Okay. So pay attention to for example, the ends of my sentences there because I'm thinking about, well, what does it do? Okay. So foreboding means the feeling or idea that something bad is going to happen. Okay. So the fact that the room is dark can create that atmosphere of darkness and maybe the feeling that something bad could happen. Okay, so got another set of questions and we'll have 5 minutes for this as well. So this is the next paragraph. So the questions that you should try and answer are, how does describing, sorry, there's a typo there. How does describing the room as chill effectively presented as intimidating? So chill meaning cold. How does that present it as intimidating? Second bullet point, at what point does the writer present the room as isolated? So isolated means that it's far away from other things or other rooms. How does an isolated setting create an intimidating atmosphere successfully? And then how does the idea of a spell help to successfully present an intimidating atmosphere? Okay, so 5 minutes for that one again. And okay, so we've got of what red can mean. Sorry, I realized that I think afterwards. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so 5 minutes has started for this. Think about those questions. Okay, just 30 more seconds and then we'll have a look at the answers. Well done so far. Okay, 5 minutes is up. Okay, some great answers there. Really good. So, yes, so it is intimidating, and I like the fact that you thought about the opposite of of cold, as warm is um, usually associated with positive feelings, and like you said, feeling of being appreciated. So a warm environment is a welcoming environment. Therefore, a cold environment can do the exact opposite. Okay, so we'll look at the answers here. For the second one, I have put the I've joined the third and fourth bullet point, so that's why there's only three because I've joined one of the answers. Okay, so a cold chill effectively creates an unpleasant image of an inhospitable environment. So inhospitable is the opposite of welcoming. Okay, so it creates that, yeah, intimidating, inhospitable, unpleasant environment. The isolation of the room with it being remote from the nursery and kitchen. So that's the key one. Silent as well can imply it being isolated, like you put. So yes, remote helps to successfully portray an intimidating image because isolation presents people in a vulnerable situation, far from help if needed. And I think you put something similar. The idea of a spell adds a mysterious element to the portrayal of the room, which is intimidating because it powerfully suggests something sinister and supernatural is keeping people away from the room. Okay, so the writer uses a metaphor there. Okay, so that choice of metaphor helps to create the idea. So you said relating to isolation, it creates a successfully intimidation because you feel in the middle of nothing with no one with. Yes, exactly. Okay, so it's that sense that if you needed help, no one is there. So it creates a sense of vulnerability and fragility that helps to create an intimidating atmosphere. Brilliant. Okay, so there's just two questions here, so it might not need the full 5 minutes. Okay, but we'll set the timer anyway. So for this one, we want to think, oh, and also just well done because you're using the evaluation vocabulary successfully. So you said it created successfully. So good use of those. So you try and use them in every sentence because for this exercise anyway, because for that question 4, you want to be evaluating, okay, and using that evaluation vocabulary. Right, for this one, how does knowing that someone died in this room aid in successfully presenting it as intimidating? Again, sorry, there's a typo there. It says at, it should say as intimidating. How does the use of personification effectively portray people's sense of dread regarding entering the room? So remember, like I said before, you can talk about language and structure, but you need to use it to support an evaluation. So here, if you talk about how the use of personification is effective, it's fine because you are evaluating it, not just analyzing it. So 5 minutes for this one. Great work so far. And keep using that evaluation vocabulary because that helps to distinguish between you analyzing and evaluating. Okay, 5 minutes have started. Okay, over halfway through. Great answer so far, and we will have some feedback in just over a minute and 30 seconds. Okay, so for this one, the revelation that someone, Mr. Reed, died in the Red Room introduces a familiar notion of a room being haunted, which successfully uses the power of suggestion to present the room as intimidating. So that's one way you could have looked at it. And then the use of personification is effective because it highlights how the death of Mr. Reed created a powerful sense of superstition that deterred people from frequently entering the room. So for the use of personification there, um, it says in the part highlighted in the orange, a sense of dreary consecration had guarded it from frequent intrusion. So consecration is a word that is sometimes used a lot in a religious context. It's the idea of something being set aside as holy or being dedicated to God as as holy. So that's where that word is often used. So in this instance, the room, okay, had now, because somebody had died in it, it had been set apart, but the adjective dreary shows us that it's set apart in a negative way where people don't want to go in there, people dread going in there, okay? And that suggests some sort of fear, okay, some sort of superstitious fear. It doesn't actually say that. The text doesn't tell us that people are superstitious or anything like that, but it is suggested by people's reluctance to go in that room and even the narrator's fear being in that room. So there's it's suggested, it's not necessarily stated as such, okay? But you mentioned that as a reader, we don't know anything about how he died, um, and we have a lot of questions. So that's true, okay? So we might have a lot of questions in that regard, okay? And not knowing the circumstances of his death can lead to a sense of mystery and intimidation for the reader. Um, what you can use, though, however, is the fact that look at how the people, the residents of that house treat that room, okay? And so it's about, yes, what's suggested through that as well. Okay, so we don't have time to actually go through the 5 minutes for this, but I'll say what the questions are and then we'll look at what the answers are, okay? So for the final part, What does the event of the narrator being fixed, riveted in one place suggest about how she was feeling in the red room? How does the idea of being jailed help to powerfully portray the room as intimidating? And then finally, how does the narrator's description of her reflection successfully present the room as intimidating? So the fact that the narrator was left riveted effectively suggests shock and fear because it suggests she's unable to move. The idea of being jailed powerfully highlights the narrator's sense of confinement, which adds to all the previous ideas of the room being imposing and the sight of someone's death. And then finally, the adjective white tells us the narrator is pale, successfully creating an image of vulnerability and fear, which is worsened by being locked in a room with seemingly no hope of escape. Okay, so that's for that ending there. We don't quite have enough time to attempt those questions. Okay, so what we've done today is we've taken, a detailed look, okay, at various points of the text. If you were answering this question in an exam situation, you would just take maybe 1 point, 1 or 2 points from each of the paragraphs that we've looked at, okay? So you take 1 to 2 points from each of those and then write your response that way. And if you would like to join one of my classes, then I've got the details on the screen. So the mastery groups, we actually do timed exam responses, and then we look at how to master responding in the exam times, because it's one thing to know how to answer the questions, but being exam ready is what we focus on in the mastery groups. I've got an Edexcel mastery group on Mondays and then an AQA mastery groups on Thursdays. Obviously, every Wednesday we have the webinars, but I also have writing groups and key stage 3 groups. And you can contact me or visit my website, www.lanaythetutor.com, if you would like to book any of those classes. And today has been great once again, because we've had lots of interaction. So really, really well done to you for that. Excellent answers throughout, and your answers have been getting better as we've progressed, because like I said, you are using the evaluation vocabulary more now. So that's very good, and that's a key element for this question. So well done for that. And thank you so much for those of you watching on replay. And leave a like if you've benefited from the video, and leaving a like helps this video get seen by more people as well. It's exam season soon, so hopefully this can help a lot of people as well. But once again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll be having another webinar next week, so I look forward to seeing you then. But yeah, that's it for today. So have a good week, and I'll see you next week. I'll see you in class. Bye. You're welcome. Bye-bye.